This is the SAU Report, a program featuring interviews with the faculty, staff, students, and alumni of Southern Arkansas University in Magnolia.
Welcome to this special Campaign 98 edition of the SAU Report. I'm Dana Thomas.
And I'm Amanda Black. With us today is a very special guest, Jay Dickey, the United States Representative for Arkansas's 4th Congressional District. Mr. Dickey was first elected in 1992 and re-elected to a third term in 1996. He's a lawyer and a small business owner from Pine Bluff. Welcome, Mr. Dickey.
Hi. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we touched on in the introduction that this was, in 96, was your third term, and if you are re-elected, it'll be your 4th term. There were some reports back when you were first campaigning that you advocated self-imposed term limits. And wondering if that's true, what changed your mind?
No, there's no changing of my mind, and I've taken the people who brought that up and asked them to go back and see if I'd been quoted differently, and there's not even a misquote that's going on. I have always said I was for term limits as long as it applied to everybody. If we have term limits and we're self-imposed as a small state, we're going to lose an enormous advantage in Congress. Seniority means so much, and the larger states, like 53 representatives are in California, will just swamp us if we're just rotating our people in and out. So it cannot be done. We also have had one other thing that's occurred, and that's in 1994 we had a tremendous overturn of representatives, incumbents that were beaten. And I think people have gotten to the point where they see that term limits really are happening at the ballot box. But I still am going to vote for it every time it comes up. I've done it. I've changed that one time, but that was because the term limits people said, we want you to vote this way at this time. No, but I'm glad you asked that, because there are a lot of people who believe I've self-imposed. No, it's not that.
Thank you.
Do you think that running for this position the 4th time around is easier than any of the other 3? And being in office already, do you think that's going to help you in your campaign?
Oh, it's no question that incumbency has its advantages. And I think, Dana, the thing that in answer to your question about being easier or harder, I take these elections as being a way of finding out what people want, and it's hard to find it out if in fact people aren't interested in the election. I'm pleased to be in the House of Representatives because we vote every 2 years. I mean, you know, we're re-elected every 2 years, and that means we have to come back and find out. There's nothing like asking someone for their vote to get a response, unless it's asking for money to contribute. But I value the responses so much that it's last time I didn't have a very enthusiastic opponent, and I didn't get the opinions like I had before. I just watched the polls. 36,000 people voted against me, and I said I'm going to go find those 36,000 people and find out what the problem is. They weren't able to tell me. I didn't talk to all of them, but they weren't able to tell me exactly what the reason was. So I think it was superficial in a lot of circumstances. But I value people's reactions, and that's the reason why I'm looking at each election as an important time of communication.
Your opponent is a state legislator, and one of the things that she's touting is her experience on the state level, that she's in tune with Arkansans because she's represented them in state government, whereas you're representing Arkansans in the United States government, and many may see you as a Washington insider now because this is your 3rd term. Do you think that's going to be an obstacle that you're facing, or not at all?
Amanda, I do so many things to get across the fact that I'm not an insider in Washington, and let me just give you some. One is that I promised in that 92 campaign that I'd come home. People kept saying, well, you'll get up there and you won't come home. You'll get reelected and you'll get used to all that. Well, I come home all the time. I come home so much, it's not necessary for me to rent a residence up there or own a residence up there. I spend 2 nights a week there on average. I get there on Tuesday morning, and I come back on Thursday night. So I sleep in my office. Now you say, what difference does that make? It makes a whole lot of difference to those people who are worried about whether or not I'm going to become part of the scene up there. I also, when I come home, I go out. It's one thing to say I'm away from Washington, and that's a benefit, because those people who are so skillful at trying to persuade representatives through all kind of influences have their field day when Congress isn't in session. So I'm away from there, but then when I come home, I'm close to the people here. It's getting to be where people understand it. Now, they do see too much of me. Some people say, well, here comes old Jay. And what are we going to say to him now? Or I have to go pick him up at the airport, or I have to do this or that. But it's part of the system of letting the air breathe in the Washington scene from here rather than the other way around. See, we have been told for so many years exactly what to expect. We know more about what's going on in Washington than you know here, and therefore we want you to be satisfied with what we tell you you're going to expect, or you should expect. What we need to do is turn that around and say, we want what we deserve. Not anymore, but we want what we deserve. And I have found that the people in the 4th District have, because of their submissiveness to a system that just sent someone up there and they got lost, because of that, we have missed opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. And for a lot of reasons, that's why I worked hard to get on the Appropriations Committee, so that we could still balance a budget, cut, slash, do everything else. But once we get to that point, then we go and we get what we deserve in the 4th District. Now, that sometimes is hard to do, because people do not see that there is a connection, you see, between the 4th District of Arkansas and Washington, D.C. I'm trying to be that connection, and it's going to take a long time. Even at that, if I'm allowed to stay in office, it's going to take a long time.
Yes, well, with the issues that we're dealing with now, the school shootings have been going on a lot lately, especially in Arkansas with Jonesboro. And what would you see happening with the school safety?
Well, I think we need to get serious about it. You know, we had hijacking in our airports and of our planes, and we seem to have brought that in. We can do the same thing. If you say, Dana, well, are you pleased that we have to go to those extremes? No. It's a sad state of affairs that we have folks who will take their fellow students and treat them almost like game and shoot them down as they come running out of a schoolroom. I think a schoolhouse. I just think it's a horrible thing. We've got just a deterioration of morals that is going on in our country, and we've got to somehow let families gain control again. Do you understand how many things we have done to try to destroy families? Let me just go over a few. One is that it's cheaper for two people to be married, to be living together and not married, tax-wise. You can, if you're single and you live with someone else who's also single, you'll pay less taxes than if you marry. Now, what does that do? We have paid people not to have a husband or a wife by honoring illegitimacy. And illegitimacy, the rates of illegitimacy in crime is something like 67% of those people who are illegitimate will be involved in crime at some point, because we've promoted that. We have promoted people to be addicts just by saying, okay, we can't do anything about it, so we're just going to pay you just to stay out of the hospitals. We don't want you to go cold turkey, because then that will create a health hazard. And so we have paid people for that. And we've paid people not to work. It's just, things are turning around now. Our welfare reform that we have 3 times put before the president and got him to sign the last time, is starting to work, and families will start coming together. So what we have to do, but we first got to protect. We've got to protect the kids in our schools, and I know we can do it. It's just, it's sad for all of us that we have to.
And when that happens, oftentimes we're seeing it more and more in our public school systems. And when parents are seeing that, one of their first responses is to take their child out of a public school and put them in a private school, which brings up the growing debate of vouchers.
Right.
And I'm wondering what your position is on that, because many opponents of that say it's going to sap resources from our public school systems.
I tell you a very interesting study, Amanda, in that respect, is vouchers in the D.C. school system. Now, you all listen to this. $9,100 a pupil is being spent in the D.C. system. The worst, if not the worst, among the worst scores educationally that ever existed are in the D.C. schools. The worst security is in the D.C. schools. So we're spending money and spending money and spending money, put layers of bureaucracy on top of these schools, and the money's not getting to the classrooms, and the kids aren't learning, and they becoming delinquents because the educational system is failing. Now, why do I mention all that? It's because I have voted, and folks have said it, I have voted for vouchers as an experiment in that area, just to see if people really do want their kids to go. What you've got to have for vouchers to work is for parents to say, I would like to have some control over the education of my children. If that's the case, and they are too poor, then they can choose where they want their students to go. If it's for security and safety, that's one thing. If it's for education or a combination of the two, then they can do it. I see nothing wrong with trying it in the DC schools because it is such a terrible failure as it is. And when people, now the interesting thing is when you propose that and people come and say, oh no, we want to keep the DC schools exactly like they are, then you have to question what they're trying to protect. The status quo can't be justified in DC. We have enough problems down here. We're spending, the most I've heard is $3,600 a student here. But still, a poor mother, single mother, or a poor couple should be able to choose, if they want to, where they can go, where their child can go, if they want to pay the price. Get them to the school, help them with their studies, and do all that. It's unfair because they don't have money. Just to say you are sentenced to this school system that hasn't produced anything but breeding grounds for crime in the past. So I am certainly for it, and I'll take that as a position anytime, and particularly as it applies to the DC schools.
Well, since you're here on Southern Arkansas University's campus, what are your views on higher education, and what did higher education mean for you?
Well, I'm a public school product in every way. Well, in my early days, I did go to a private school. That's because my parents wanted me out of the house a year before I was allowed to go to school. So I spent some time. But my sister's public education, my mother and dad were public education, my wife was a public education product, and all my children have graduated from public schools. So I know, and we've all gone to higher education, schools of higher education, and so I can really say that I can see it from a parent's viewpoint. Higher education is doing a great job. We're still suffering a lot in the math and sciences, as we globally are looking at, but what we're having the remedial students coming out of this status quo system that's putting a greater burden on the schools of higher education. And I think once we get that cleared up, if we can just get the secondary schools in order, and we can start educating kids and not trying to do all other things for them and to them in some instances, then we can have a better system higher education-wise. But I think we're putting enough money there. It's not a question of money not being given. It's just a question of how in the world we're going to overcome the remedial type of student that we're sending to the higher educations. I think it's a lot of burden, but I think we can do it. And I'm just proud of SAU and the schools I have in my district. I think they're excellent.
Well, going from education to the 4th District, according to the Cook Political Report, more than 60% of the 4th District is a Democratic performance district. Wondering, it's returned you, a Republican, to the post 3 times. What are you doing to bring them into the fold? I
have no idea. What I'm finding out, Amanda, is that I'm getting reelected, but I'm not changing the landscape as far as Republican and Democrats, from what I can tell. And it's because I've been saying, just elect me, and these are my conservative views. I think if I were a Democrat, I would get the same treatment. It's incredible how everybody in Washington looks at the 4th District. I mean, they keep saying, well, it's impossible. There's no way a Republican can win. But what we have is we are a staunch, independent group of folks. I mean, we just sit and just say, we'll decide what we want to decide. In the very year that Bill Clinton was sweeping this district, they elected a congressman that was a Republican. Now that's enough said. I couldn't raise money. I couldn't get my name mentioned in any way, shape, or form. But somehow those folks said, no, wait a minute. I know we're excited about having the first president from Arkansas ever elected, a man from Hope and Hot Springs, which is in this district, and all his friends and everything else. But we're going to choose over here another person who won. He just happens to be Republican. it's an amazing thing. But I love, Amanda, listening to those guys up there and gals when they say, there's no way you can get reelected. And I'll just say, we'll see. We'll see. And they're saying it again this year. They're just saying that the demographics. I think Clinton, rightfully so, got more margin here than any district in the nation in '92. But there's something about these folks, if you just will consider them individually and not as in classes, just individually. And that's what I've been able to get across. The danger was, and the real tragedy from my standpoint would have been the tragedy of miscommunication, if they never would have understood that and wiped me out because I didn't have name recognition, that I'd never been in politics before, and didn't have any kind of political structure or system. That could have taken me out the first time. But I think right now I'm just listening. I'm very careful to listen. And when I disagree, I'm doing it out of respect. I'm not doing it out of arrogance.
We'll go into another issue. What are your thoughts on the tax on cigarettes and tobacco?
I'm against all taxes, period. It's interesting, as a representative, I'm against all taxes. I'm going to vote. I may vote on my private vote on certain tax issues, but I'm against all taxes. The cigarette tax is an x-ray into what's really wrong in Washington, and that is that the representatives in Washington have gotten reelected on having money of other people's to spend to get votes in return. Now what's happened is that spending addiction, and that's what it is, has shown its ugly head again with the tobacco tax proposals, because those people weren't interested in eliminating tobacco. They were frothing at the mouth and becoming glassy-eyed over the fact that this money was coming in unfettered, and they then could put it in place. Now that's Republicans and Democrats. That's all liberals, and there are liberals in the Republican Party too. But they were just so excited. The excitement was unbelievable. Here, billions and billions of dollars would come. Where was it going to come from? From the lowest echelon of our wage earners. You see? I mean, up to I don't know what the percent was, but up to $30,000 of salary, they were going to be paying an enormous amount in increased taxes on cigarettes. No one was saying, well, what about these folks? Except I kept on saying, I'm against it, I'm against it. It's not right. Taxes will, in fact, destroy this whole part of our economy. I've never smoked. I've never inhaled. And I think it's a terrible habit. But I have been around people who are addicted to cigarettes and people who are addicted to alcohol. And cigarette addiction, in my opinion, has a greater hold on people's activities than anything. And here we were going to profit from their addiction. There's an immorality part of this thing too. But I'm against that. I'd really be interested in how y'all feel about it, but I guess we can't do that to them. But I feel like I'll vote against the cigarette tax no matter what.
Well, in Arkansas, there's been a whole lot of talk about the poor condition of our highways. If you come down I-30, I-49, it's in need of repair, but unfortunately there's been not enough money to heal that system. I'm wondering, what's your vision for the highways in Arkansas and the highway miles that you gained along the Rosedale route and coming through on Arkansas?
Yes.
Do you feel like that was a win or merely a compromise?
Well, it's interesting how it all started, Amanda. We were all excited about the prospects of having a whole lot of highways being funded in our district. Now, almost immediately, the environmentalists and the true conservatives said we shouldn't be spending that money. But I had to make the decision to go forward on the basis that it would help our economy, that it wasn't really money that was dead, just brought in this and it was a monument. It was usable money, and that in the form of pavement and helping the economy and industries and so forth. Now, what we got is we got an unusual amount of attention for our 4th district because of a variety of reasons, mainly because of years and years and years of work that had been done by people who had just seen that to be of real value. What we've ended up in the 4th district, we've gotten $31 million of special projects. We have gotten a designation of I-69 coming from Rosedale, splitting Magnolia and El Dorado and going into Louisiana. That's 125 miles. every mile of interstate represents an enormous impact in an economy. Now, I know there's some negatives. I mean, I even heard that it would increase the drug traffic, and that we'll have to have more law enforcement. Well, that might very well be. But we have that to do. But even just the construction of it is just so incredible. 592 jobs per mile of interstate construction will affect the economies within 5 miles on either side of an interstate. That means that much money's coming in. 592 jobs. It's just it's enough for you to politically die for a mile of interstate. Now, we've also got a connector road, interesting enough, from Monticello to I-69 that's been authorized, and that didn't come easy. We had a lot of help from Senator Hutchison on the Senate side on that, but that didn't come easy. But I'm looking for us to have a lot more highways, a lot more money from the federal government, and for us to somehow get safety up front, because some of these roads, Amanda, are so narrow that if you're meeting a truck or two trucks meeting each other, the rear view mirrors of each truck are in danger. And it's just, and I don't know why we put up with it. Again, we have just sat and said, what are you all going to give us? Now we're trying to say this is what we deserve. And I don't know, I don't know if I'm going to be living long enough or be in office long enough to see it happen, but we are starting to bring industry. And another thing, we can convert those people on unemployment and welfare to tax-paying jobs and give them the self-esteem and the self-respect that they deserve, really. So a lot of this is being done for people who don't even know it's coming.
Well, now that's on one side of the state. What about, can you give us an update on the Texarkana, the route there?
It's going to happen. It's going to happen. In spite of us, we're having so many angles. That is so far down the pike compared to the other. I mean, it's you know how Newark is. Newark always attracts your attention and energy, but the I-49 is going to be very critical. It's connecting Kansas City with Shreveport virtually, and we're coming down 71, and it's called I-49. We're now having the problem whether to loop around Texarkana or not, and I'm just sitting waiting. We're just going to see what's going to happen, but we're going to have to wait for the funding too. See, we have to fight for the funding. This is a job that's just, when you hear all these headlines, it means now we have to start working to get the money.
Well, I know you spoke out against increasing the minimum wage. Could you explain your thoughts about that?
It costs jobs. And another problem, Dana, that it has, and I'm an employer. I have been. I've had to sell my businesses now. But one of the problems, down in the midst of all that, is it's wrong for people to sit and wait for the federal government to give them a pay increase. It's just wrong. They need to let their work and how they are affecting the business of their employer give them the pay increase. And when you sit there, it sends a difficult message for an employer when someone says, okay, you were making $5.75, now the minimum wage, because the minimum wage is increased, you now will get $6, or you'll get $6.50, because you can't just have somebody move up. You know, you have strata. So it costs jobs. Now when it costs, here's what happens. If you can't afford, if you're in the penny business like I was in the taco business, and you can't afford to increase prices, then what you have to do is sustain the shock of your employees being at a higher wage and eating into the profits, plus all the people who deliver in the supplies and the lettuce and the meat and everything else, their employees have gone up, so they have to incrementally increase their services and their products to you. So you have it all, and then you look across the counter and someone says, no, I'm not going to pay any more than 59 cents for a taco. Then what you have to do is you have to eliminate the employees. When you eliminate the employees, then service goes bad. When you eliminate service, then people decide they'd rather eat somewhere else or stay home. So it just goes backwards. I think our economy has functioned and in spite of the increase of the minimum wage. Now somebody else is coming to do it. But put all that aside, this is what the issue is. The issue is the Northeast markets are trying to preserve their existence. They don't want any more of their industry move into the South. So if they can increase the minimum wage in the South, it's the same thing that we had during the Civil War. It's the same thing, where if they don't have if they don't have people competing in the South at lower wages, there's not a minimum wage person in New York City to be found. They're getting $6 and $7. They don't really, that doesn't affect them at all. They can vote those things. They could take minimum wage to $7 and not be affected. What they don't want is for industry to see the lower wages down here and move from there to here. So it's the Northeast that's dictating all this, which as a Southerner, I resent that also. But I gave you first the businessman's position. Then I gave it from the Southern political standpoint, and then it's a market protection scheme. And I'm against it. I'm going to vote against it the next time.
Well, that's of interest to wage earners, and also of interest to wage earners and employers is the tax code. There's been big discussions about eliminating it by 2001, and
that's right.
Some people believe it's too voluminous.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Well, I think a great point, Amanda, is this, and we've said it. If you really want to help the worker, then give them a tax refund. Now, I'm not saying a tax cut. I'm saying a tax refund. And oh no, we don't want to do that because we want government to be big, and we want to be able to take money from the wage earner and give it to folks so that we can politically benefit from it. But those tax burdens that our workers are having to carry are enormous. They are regressive. Now, what happens is that you may not say the FICA tax, FICA tax, is something that hits everybody to a certain level all the way up to $65,000. So the person who's paying down here in the under $30,000 range is paying a great deal more percentage-wise than someone who's earning like Michael Jordan, makes $7 million, you see. That's what's unfair. And we sit and we take it and we take it and we take it and we argue about minimum wage. What we ought to be doing is saying, give me a refund on my taxes. Now this surplus is coming up. You see, a refund to the people who are earning it needs to be done. If we do it with FICA taxes, we're going to be strengthening Social Security. But you watch what happens now. The argument's going to be, oh, we're trying to protect the rich. People making under, let's say, $50,000 are getting tired of being called rich, when in fact, the increased costs that we have across the nation are so great that $50,000 has been eaten up in so many different ways.
Well, who do you think the first beneficiaries of the tax policy reform should be?
Middle class.
Middle class.
And because it's so large, it has been abused for so long. Because it's been abused for so long, there's not any real uprising. I think we ought to look at it from the standpoint of what they can do, what the middle class can do with extra dollars. But it needs to be a tax refund. Taxes that we took from you all, that we no longer need, and we're giving it back to you because of the surplus. If we do that, then it will get into our economy, it will be spent, you see, and it'll bring up greater demand, and we'll have an increase in our economy. It also will bring in more tax revenues. Cut taxes, you'll bring in more tax revenues because you broaden the base. And as you broaden the base, you take people off of the government welfare rolls, off of unemployment, so you win twice. Now that's what's happening right now. The 3 million plus who are off of welfare are workers right now. Now you think about the dynamics of that. They're not taking any money from us. They're not living the lie of not working, or well, that's not. They're now working, and they're paying the government taxes, and they're ending up with more. But we've got to make it so that they get more than that even.
As we wrap up, if you had one campaign message to get out to our viewers in South Arkansas that sums up your campaign, what would that be?
Well, I hadn't thought about that, but I'd think unity. I may say something different tomorrow, but I think unity. What we need to do is find out what we have in common and quit finding out what we have as differences. Now, in the 4th District, I think we can do it. I think we can look from the borders of Mississippi to the borders of Oklahoma, Texas, and Louisiana, and all the people in between, and say we want to find out what we have in common. It's a tremendous district. The potential is almost unreal. We've got natural resources, the timber and the water and the agricultural. We've got resources that are unreal, but we still are worrying about, well, if he gets this, and then I don't get it. If he gets this, and if we could somehow get unity. Now I think we need that as a nation too. What I'd like for us to be is kind of a, well, even racially, we've got an unusual assignment we could do in the 4th District. But what I'd like for us to be is a lighthouse, a beacon of a model, of a role model for the rest of the nation. But we first got to get unity here, and that's what my wish would be.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for joining us on a special campaign edition of the SAU Report. I'm Dan Thomas.
And I'm Amanda Black. Thank you.
The SAU Report is a production of broadcast journalism students in the Department of Theater and Mass Communication at Southern Arkansas University in Magnolia.